What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and it is time for the college football playoff this week. Yes, New Year's Day on Friday, we are going to finally see the college football playoff, something that back several months ago we didn't know if we were even going to get to see this year. But yes, we will have a college football playoff, and I think it's going to be very entertaining. Some people think that this first matchup between Notre Dame and Alabama is not going to be very entertaining. Alabama, big favorites in this matchup. I'm going to give you a quick preview of this game and give you my prediction on what I think is going to happen. We're going to do this one today. Tomorrow, I'll do Ohio State versus Clemson. So you're going to get my official playoff prediction in both of these games. So starting here with Notre Dame and Alabama, they're going to play first. They will play in the Rose Bowl, but it'll actually be in Texas. So it is the Rose Bowl, but it's not at the Rose Bowl. It'll be at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Again, on New Year's Day, Friday on ESPN. Both games on ESPN. Alabama favored by 20. Alabama comes in at 11-0. No losses. Really, their toughest game of the year might have been against Ole Miss, or maybe you could say Florida. I guess Florida probably had a better chance to really beat them, even though Ole Miss went toe-to-toe with Alabama most of the game. Notre Dame, 10-1. Looked great all year until finally that game against Clemson in the rematch in the ACC Championship, of course. They were really embarrassed in that game, a game that was not close at all. And because of that game, I think that's why you're seeing the spread at 20 points. That's why no one's really giving Notre Dame a chance. But if you look at this Notre Dame team throughout the year, they were a very good team, a very solid team. And I think what happened in that game is it was just the fact that Clemson was really motivated, especially on the defensive side of the ball. After the loss earlier in the year, they just wanted it more. They played harder. They prepared better. And that is a big part of college football. It's not always the team that's the better team. It's the team that wants it more, that plays harder, that prepares better, things like that. I think that score doesn't necessarily reflect where those two teams are. I think if they played again, I think it would be a little bit closer. I do think Clemson is the better team, but again, I think people are overreacting to that game a little bit, thinking that Notre Dame is a terrible team. No, this is still a very good team, and they've shown that all year long. So let's take a look at the stats for this game. The big story here, points per game. Look at Alabama, 49.7 points per game. They're averaging right at 50 points a game. It's just been an unbelievable offense this year. On the other side for Notre Dame, 35.2, which is very solid. But again, it's nowhere close to Alabama. And then points allowed, Notre Dame's defense has been a little bit better, 18.6 points per game, and Alabama's there at 19.5. And really, just a couple of games, the Florida game and the Ole Miss game for Alabama, you take those two games out, and Alabama's defense has really been very solid this year. And I really like how they've improved from the beginning of the year. They got better and better and better. Yeah, they played a great Florida offense in the SEC Championship. But still, I think this is a very good defense, and it's a defense that is probably the best defense Alabama has had in a few years, because they were not as great the last couple of years. So now you've got the defense back. The offense is playing at an elite level. It makes this team tough to beat. You see the total yards per game. Alabama averages 543 yards per game. Actually, if you round it up, 544. Notre Dame, 455. Big advantage for Alabama. Their offense just much more explosive than Notre Dame's. Through the air, you can see the story right there. 354 for Alabama, 237.5 for Notre Dame. That's the difference in these two teams. Alabama is balanced. They can throw the football. They're explosive in the passing game. For Notre Dame, they're a little bit better on the year at running the football. 217.6 yards per game, 189.8 for Alabama. But I think that has more to do with Alabama just throwing the ball more. Their play calling is a little bit different. Notre Dame is a little bit more conservative on the offensive side of the ball. Alabama has really opened it up this year, and that's why you're seeing these big numbers. Yards allowed, Notre Dame is a little bit better, 335. Alabama, 351, but pretty close. And then you got the passing yards allowed per game. Notre Dame at 224, Bama 243. Rush yards allowed, they're right there about the same. Alabama has a slight advantage of 107.6 yards per game. Notre Dame 110.5 yards per game. So again, you look at these two teams, they can both run the football very similarly. They both can run the ball very well. Defensively, they're pretty similar. They're both very solid on that side of the ball. again, the difference in these two teams is the explosiveness of the Alabama passing attack, something that Notre Dame really just does not have. And that's what I said about Notre Dame earlier in the year. I think it was maybe before the first Clemson game. That's the separation between Alabama and Clemson, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. In today's age of college football, you've got to be able to be explosive in the passing game, and that's just something that Notre Dame has not been able to do. It's a different style, and if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to do some things to where they're going to control the clock. They're going to run the football. Their defense is going to have to force a couple of turnovers. There's a formula for Notre Dame to make this an interesting game, and if they do things, if things go exactly like they need them to go, yeah, this could be a good game. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Here are the leaders for these two teams. Ian Book, Mac Jones, the quarterbacks. Mac Jones has thrown for almost 4,000 yards this year. Ian Book, over 2,600. But he's taking care of the football. Only 2 interceptions, only 15 touchdowns. But again, only 2 interceptions. He's been very good at taking care of the football. And also, I love his creativity in the pocket. That's what I've really enjoyed watching with Ian Book this year. His ability to scramble around in the pocket, buy time, make some plays with his feet. That's something he is going to have to do in this game. If they're going to beat Alabama, Ian Book is going to have to run the ball some. I think we've seen in the past, those are the types of things that offenses can do to really give Alabama defenses trouble. Even Kyle Trask ran the ball a little bit against Alabama. So you've got to do that if you're Ian Book. But Mac Jones, again, huge numbers here, throwing for, who saw that coming? We knew he was a good quarterback after we saw it at the end of last year, but he's playing really right there at the same level as Tua. And this passing attack has just gotten better and better over the last few years for Alabama. On the ground, both teams have great running backs. Williams for Notre Dame, he's run for over 1,000 yards. Najee Harris, almost 1,300 yards. Had more carries, but Kyron Williams really kind of came out of nowhere. He wasn't even, if you go back to the spring, he wasn't really even on the depth chart. And he has emerged as a superstar running back. And I think he's a big reason for Notre Dame's success this year. Last year, you go back and you look, they really couldn't run the football very consistently. This year, different story. They're able to run the ball, and it's taken some pressure off of Ian Book. It's made this offense much, much better. He is a big part of it. And then through the air, Javon McKinley, 697 yards receiving. Compare that to Devontae Smith. It's not even close. Over 1,500 yards for Devontae Smith. 17 touchdowns. He is just a superstar. I think he deserves the Heisman Trophy. We'll see if he winds up winning it. He has my vote. That's who I would vote for. So these are the leaders. Again, these are the guys that you can expect to step up in this game. Can Notre Dame even stop Devontae Smith? No one has really been able to do that. If they're going to have any chance, they're going to have to. So that'll be a really interesting matchup there. You see, this is from OddsShark. You see the spread is 20 for Alabama. The consensus there is pretty much split. If you look at who they're expecting to win, Notre Dame actually has a 53% percentage there, just a slight advantage. And when I say win, I'm talking about against the spread. So based off of this, you would expect this score to be around 20 points. The over has the advantage in the consensus here at 65.5. That's the over-under. So, yeah, the bettors are thinking that this is going to be a very high-scoring game. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But, yeah, that's very interesting. Just something to look at. The FBI, before we get to the FBI, this is the whatever you call it, the predictor that OddsShark puts out there. It came out with a predicted score of 52 to 30.6. So a big advantage here for Alabama, even has them covering the spread. And again, a lot of points in this game. Going by this, you would see over 80 points combined. So if this is accurate, of course, you're going to want to take the over. But again, I disagree with this. I don't think it's going to be that high scoring. The FBI also leaning towards Alabama. 81.1% chance to win. Notre Dame just an 18.9% chance. So the FBI big time favors Alabama in this matchup. Everyone favoring Alabama. No one really giving Notre Dame a chance. So my thoughts on this one, how I think it's going to go. One thing about Notre Dame, and we've seen it this year, if you look at the line of scrimmage, both sides of the ball, they can compete with Alabama. Their offensive line is very good. It's right there with Alabama's. Their defensive line right there with Alabama's. So if you look at the line of scrimmage, Alabama doesn't have a huge advantage in this game. And because of that, I think Notre Dame can hang around. I think their defense is going to play really, really well in this one. I think they'll be well prepared. You go back to that Florida game. Florida got some stops against Alabama. Got several stops. Really shot themselves in the foot. Got some stops, but had some penalties and some things go against them. We saw, maybe a formula there for some things that you can do. Now, you got to get Alabama into third downs. You got to get pressure on Mac Jones. There are things. There is a formula in place that can cause a little bit of problem for this Alabama offense. I think Notre Dame's going to find some success early. I think it's a lower scoring game early on. Very similar to the Notre Dame-Clemson game. I think this game is going to play out like that. The problem for Notre Dame is just, again, the explosiveness of their offense. They're going to try to run the ball. They're going to use those tight ends. They're going to try to nickel and dime it down the field. What can they do in the red zone? That's going to be very tough. Again, Ian Book is going to have to use his legs, especially in that spot in the red zone. I don't really see Notre Dame being able to do enough offensively. Yes, Alabama's defense has given up a lot of points in a couple of games, but those are just different types of offense. This is not an offense that normally is going to give Alabama a lot of problems. It's not a team that's going to stretch the field and throw long passes. It's not a team that they could be, but they're not going to run the quarterback a lot, I don't think. If Ian Book goes out and they run a ton of read option, I think that's probably their best bet in this game. You got to work the edges. I mean, there are things you can do, but I just don't. To me, this Notre Dame offense is just not the type of offense, like I said, that is going to give Alabama a lot of problems. I think their defense will hang around in this game. They'll keep it somewhat close. Not going to just give up a ton of big plays. They're a very solid defense. And again, I think people overreact to that Clemson game just a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be enough. Alabama's the better team. They win this one 38-17. Like I said, I don't expect it to be as high scoring. I think Notre Dame's defense slows Alabama down just a little bit, holding them under their season average in just the 38 points. It's a game where Alabama, once they get a lead, a comfortable lead, they're probably going to get conservative in the second half, make sure they protect their players and get ready for the national championship. Nick Saban is not one to run up the score. This is a very important game. Again, you might even see some starters being pulled from this one to prepare for the national championship. But again, at the end of the day, I just don't see Notre Dame's offense being able to do enough to consistently score in this game. I've got Alabama 38, Notre Dame 17. That is my official prediction. What do you guys think about this one? Give me your prediction down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.